G'day folks, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. My name's Rod Moore from the Learn to Paint Academy, and we've got something a little bit different for you this week, as we always try and keep it interesting and keep the variety there. So this week we're going to use a painting that Monet did as our inspiration, and we're going to do a sort of a variation on a theme. The painting is the Poppies by Monet, so let me show you that. There you can see it on the screen. Now we're not going to copy that, we're going to use it as inspiration for what we do here on Learn to Paint TV. We like to paint in a loose expressionist, impressionist sort of way. So we're going to take that as a sort of a starting point, and from there we're going to develop our own little landscape scene with a similar look and feel, being inspired by Monet. So what I've done, I'll show you on our palette cam here, is I've been playing around with a few little drawings, and you can see this one here that I've done. This is a little sketch of Monet's poppy fields. In fact, I'll just turn it around the other way. And so you can see I've used the inspiration of the Monet painting. We've got the horizon line through there, but I'm going to put another little hill in there and a little tree in this side. We've got a row of trees through the horizon line. I've got a little house as Monet had. I'm going to put a secondary little house there, and I'm going to put a couple, a mother and child, so similar to what Monet had, but we're not going to copy his characters. And then we'll put some poppy fields and flowers in the foreground, receding into the background there. So it should be a bit of fun, something a bit different, and you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at the old master paintings and drawing inspiration from them. And so I thought today we would utilize a Monet painting that's very popular, very well known, and one that you can then adapt into your own painting, and you can see how you can then create endless streams of paintings based off of old master paintings and so on. So first of all, I've got French ultramarine blue. Now I have to point out, this is not necessarily the palette that Monet used, but it's what we use, and it seems to get us good results. So French ultramarine blue and permanent crimson, okay, or permanent alizarin, or permanent alizarin crimson. And the brand I'm using is the Acrylic Interactive Paints, a terrific acrylic paint, and get good results with those. So we're putting in our primary colours, a blue, a red, and our yellow is going to be yellow ochre, okay. Nice earthy sort of yellow, good for landscape painting. And then we'll need some white. And now I will add to that some booster colours when we get towards the end in our detailing step. Okay, so just a little bit of white for now. Should might need a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so the very first step with the Moore method of painting is our drawing step. Step one, we need to draw in our big shape. So let's just go back to the photo that Monet had, and we'll just have a quick look through it there. As you can see, there's a horizon line sort of sitting about 2/3 of the way up, and he's got a light sky, kind of a cerulean blue, I'd say, he's used in there. And he's got some fluffy clouds in there. And then there's a row of trees, and there's actually two hills. Where that little house is sitting is in the background on a row, and there's a row of trees there. And then there's a forward hill where the second lady with her child is. Canvas is a 16 by 20 inch canvas. And I'm going to start out just using a little flat brush here. Swish it in some water. And as always, I like to take a little bit of our blue and red, mix up a dark, like so. Don't have to get this perfect. Okay, we're just going to get this a little bit more water into this, make it ink-like consistency, so it's a little bit runny, and we're just going to use that for our drawing purposes. So we're going to run that horizon line, as we said. It's going to run through about there. I'm going to run it just slightly downhill, and then I'm going to run another hill that way. Okay, so we're not going to copy how Monet had his. Then we're going to put a little cottage, little farmhouse, just here. Okay, and it's really simple shapes. We're not going to fuss about getting too good a drawing there. And then off in the distance, we may or may not have another one. We'll see. But what I will do is just go and get in some tree shapes in here. So to row of trees. So we'll just run them in like that. And then I'll put one slightly larger one that's rising up to there. Like so. That leaves the rest of that sky in there. And just looking at my drawing now, if I put my people there, it kind of doesn't work because I've got that line running down there. Oh, look, maybe it will. Maybe I'll have a lady standing there in a dress and her child there with a hat. Something like that. You can see that that's quite a simple little drawing that we've done there, and anyone can do that. You know, I've just made a few marks, very basic, very simple. The next step now is to really get our block in looking right and working right. So that's our step 2. So let's go and tackle step 2. Okay, so step 2 is our blocking. Our darkest dark is going to be in this bush here. I'll get a brush to point. It's really going to be in this bush here, some shadows in here, and our 2 people are going to be fairly dark, even though we'll put them in some light coloured dresses, but in the shadow side of them, it's going to be fairly dark. So that'll be our darkest darks, and then this plane up the back here is going to be a fair bit bluer and greyer and lighter in value for these trees. So with that in mind, let us start with the distant. We'll start with our distant trees there. I'm going to take the ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and touch of the yellow ochre in there. Okay, I've got a fair bit of water in there, so this is just the blocking. So I don't mind using a bit of water in the blocking. And I'm going to take a pinhead of this white. See how much of the white I've got there? It really is just a pinhead, isn't it? And we're just going to pop that in there. Maybe too much. Yeah, it does look a little bit too much. So therefore, we get a little bit more blue in there. Okay, and keep in mind that this is the shadow of these trees here. Now I think that's not a bad tone. I'm going to go with that. Now, notice I'm using that part of the brush there. Just the little edge, and I'm just scrubbing it. Just a very gentle little touch. And the reason why I scrub it like that is I want to get these edges, these outer edges, where they meet the sky, to be a little bit random, a little bit tree-like. Okay, you want to avoid, and it's challenging as a beginner to avoid, I know, painting lollipops, round balls on sticks for trees. Okay, now I think that's not a bad little tone we've got going there. I'm happy with that. I'm going to continue with that. We can always adjust it, you know, in step 3 when we come in and we want to refine and get our shapes and tones and values looking better. But as a starting point, I think that's we're onto something here. I'll get a little touch bluer in there just to cool down inside the bottom of that bigger tree. And it's all about the shapes with trees. Okay. You know, in the Learn to Paint Academy, we've got no end of painting projects and courses for you. But if you just want something a little bit different, then the idea here today is to show you how you can utilize what's already out there. And don't copy it directly. That's the big key, isn't it? I've made sufficient modifications here that nobody's going to look at this and say, oh, well, you copied Monet. I mean, in our description, we'll say that this was inspired by Monet. But it certainly won't be a direct copy of his work. Okay, so now what I've done, I've taken some more of the blue and I've added in the permanent crimson. I'm not going to put any yellow in because when you put the yellow in, the third primary into the mix, what it does is it greys it back. Okay. Now what we're doing here is we're going to paint foreground, so we don't want to grey that back. And I'm also not going to add any white for the same reason. We don't want to reduce the value. This is going to be our darkest dark here, right? So there's going to be a little clump of bushes here that it's really a stopper, stop the eye running out of the painting there. We might have there might be some others there, we don't know yet. Okay, little bit of shadow on this side. We're going to have the light coming from up the back, which means that if this has got a little cutting in the path here, it will have partly in shadow. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. We don't know entirely until we get a bit more into this painting, but I'll put a note there just in case I need some shadow there, right? It's better to put that in now than try and come back later with it. And our people, let's go a little touch darker again. I've got this lady here, we've got a little bit of a dress, okay, and her face, and some hair. Okay, and look, we're not going to do portraits here, so don't worry, we're just going to indicate a mother and a child there, and we'll put some flowers around them and so on. Now what we need to do is get in a field colour, the underpainting of a field colour, and it's mostly going to be greens with flowers laid over the top is how it's going to look. But I think for the underpainting we want to get an orange tone in there, a reddy orange, more on the red side, and it needs to be lighter in value at the back, and it needs to be a gradient coming forward, okay? So our darkest version of it and darker value is going to be in the foreground here. So we can create some recession in the painting here. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to start off with our red, so a big chunk of the alizarin red there, a big chunk of the yellow. We mix those together and just see what we've got. Now because this is the underpainting, okay, we will use a bit of water. I'll take some white in here now and we'll just reduce that value back, okay. And also because this is going to be for up here, we need to have that grade off a bit, so we'll take a little bit of the blue, just a pinhead of the blue. See that pinhead there? Okay, good. We'll just mix that in. Adding that third primary in will just reduce the saturation ever so slightly, and that'll give us a bit more of a feeling of recession and depth in there. Now where we're going to have these two areas intersect, okay, blur those edges. Don't have a hard edge, okay, like that's a hard edge through there, okay? And what I want is to have that softened out. So I'll just get in there while it paints with it and do a bit of finger painting, okay? Which is okay to do with the acrylics. We don't want to make a habit of it. Don't do it with oils though. Okay. And just feather the edges slightly like so, because we'll have some grasses and things that are going to overlap. The last thing you want to do is paint right up to the edge and have a hard edge where the two intersect. Then it's going to look like everything's pasted on. But if you overlap and intersect the different areas, then everything will look a lot happier and a lot more natural. Okay? So this is about just getting colour down now. So a bit more water. I don't mind if it comes on a little bit thin through here. Okay. You can see now I didn't put any white into that. Just cut around those two figures. Kind of like Michelangelo cutting David out of a block of marble there. Kind of like that, but you know, not really. Nice to imagine though, isn't it? So folks, I'm happy with the way this is coming along, and I'm just thinking it'd be nice to have a little bit of sun coming in the back here of the actually maybe behind this main tree, and then that way we can highlight our little figures and put a little bit of light into our figures, and I think that's going to look nice. So I'm going to use yellow ochre and titanium white, mix those two together, and we'll put that behind the trees, and then we'll get bluer further away. So hopefully we'll be able to create a real sense of light coming into this painting. So using another big brush, chunk of our titanium white here, and some of the yellow ochre. Okay. I'll get a little pinhead of the red in there as well. That'll tie it into what we're already doing here. in the foreground. Now, I'm not going to use any water in the sky because what I want to try and do with the sky is to get it in one go. I don't want to have to come back after this. So I'm pretty much just going to use thick paint here. Okay. So whereas the other areas we're going to block in and then we're going to come back and detail up, I don't typically want to do that with my sky. I find that if I can do it in one pass, then that frees me up to then concentrate on, unless the painting is about skies and clouds, right? Whereas in this painting, we know that that's not the case. It's an important part, and I'm making it more important than perhaps what Monet had in his Poppies painting, because I'm going to utilise this glowing sunlight here. Some of that out there. Okay, I'm going to utilise that as a way to highlight things on the building here, on these trees and our people, so we'll get a nice feeling of light here. So we're probably putting more importance on the sky than what Monet had, although he had some nice clouds. Now, I don't really like putting clouds into a landscape. I think they can get a bit too busy looking. See that I've mixed ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, titanium white, already had the yellow ochre on my brush and didn't clean it because I need to integrate these colours here. Yeah, I think with a landscape, if you have too many clouds into it, it can make it look a bit busy. I think if you want to do a focus on clouds, that you should maybe lower your horizon line down and have a bigger sky than what we've got here, and make it a painting about clouds. That's just me. Perhaps we'll add more clouds into some landscapes soon, because I know I don't do them very often, or I have a very loose approach to doing them. Okay, just very light touch here. Notice I'm working around what I've already done. Okay, and now I'm going to just get a little pinhead of the water, scoop up a bit more of that blue, and just where the edges are, I'm just going to feather those together. Very, very light. I don't want to have too much pressure on the paint because I don't want it to go and mix. Okay folks, well, I think we've done a pretty good job of our blocking here. I can already feel that this painting is going to be a real nice little landscape painting inspired by Monet, but not copied. And you know, I'm excited about it. I can't wait to finish it off. But as you know, with acrylics, I always like to let it dry after step 2. So we've just done step 2, our blocking. I like to let it dry off and get it bone dry before we come in and then do our step 3, details, highlights, finishing touches. Now, there are some artists out there who show to use a hairdryer. I think the paint dries a bit flat and a bit muted out because of the hairdryer. So I like to let it dry naturally. And I also think it's a good idea to have a little bit of a break. So I'm going to go half an hour, have a cup of tea, run some errands, and when I come back, we'll be ready to go with this, and it'll turn out to be a terrific little painting. You wait and see. So I'll see you after the break, and we'll get stuck into the next step. Cheers. Okay, welcome back folks. We're now going to go do step 3, and as always, we've let this dry off. It's looking pretty good, and I think we're ready to go now for step 3. I'm going to start off, we'll put a little bit of detail work into those buildings at the back there. The trees at the back and the building. We'll start to bring those up and put a bit of sunlight around those, and then we'll work into our field and our figures, and then we'll just do our final touches after that. So I'm happy the way this is coming together, and I think it's going to make a good little project. Let's just go up to our close-in view there with our palette. So I've got on the palette, actually I'll just go back to the palette. So I've got more French ultramarine blue. I just refreshed my paint. The permanent crimson, the yellow ochre, and the titanium white as per normal. And I'm going to start out using a little small flat brush and a medium sized one. So I'll be predominantly using those two for this first part here in this session. So let's get underway. Let's just revisit our inspiration. So this is the Monet's painting. And notice that he's got his trees, they're fairly emerald green, and I'm going to move away from that a little bit. Large brush, a little touch of water in there. Actually, I don't really want too much water, so I'll dry that out a little bit. Let's get back into our ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, and a pinhead of the yellow ochre in there. Okay, and then we had a touch of white in there as well. Now that's probably a little bit on the red side by comparison, so it needs just a touch more blue in there. Notice I did a test. I always do a little bit of a test up on the board. Tricky with acrylics because you have to remember that it's going to dry a little bit lighter. Sorry, a little bit darker. So we need to start a little bit lighter. So I'll add a little bit more white into that and a touch more blue. Needs to be slightly on the blue side, just purely because of where it is in the distance. So what I'll do is, that's better, okay. So because I put the sky around, there's a little bit of white canvas left, and just in a few spots here and there where I didn't want to push it up to that wet paint previously. So we'll just re-establish our darks in there. And just using little flicky bits of the edge there, just scrubbing that in, and that'll give you some nice sort of tree-like effects. Okay. Now you need to practice that technique obviously, and it comes down to knowing how much paint you've got on the brush and so on. If you've got too much on there, it'll go on a bit blocky. Create a few little extra trees in there. So I'm re-establishing my darks, just strengthening them up a little bit, and what that's also doing is then putting some fresher wet paint down, which will then be handy for us to just work in some other tones and so on. So it's a good practice to get into. Our first pass, like when we do step 2, the blocking, that's really about just establishing the values and getting colour down into those big shapes. And now we're going to refine it, and with that greying back effect, it will put it back in the distance. Now, I've got a fair bit of paint on the brush there. I hope you can see that. What I want to do is just pull that through the paper towel, just reduce the amount of paint on the brush. This is a key when you're now starting to get into details and highlights. Is when we're blocking in, doesn't matter so much how much paint we have, but when we're doing our details and our highlights, we want to now start controlling the amount of paint. And you can see I've got a lot less paint on there now. And I'm going to use that just to work around the edges here of this tree. And that's a really nice green for this, I think. It's got enough yellow in there to have that glowing effect, but it's still working nicely with the shadow tone. And why is it doing that? Because we're using a limited palette. Everything's working in harmony together. Okay, that's a real important distinction that I hope you get from watching our videos. Okay. Real soft, gentle touch. And I'm doing around the edges because we're creating a halo effect with this tree. It's kind of backlit. You can see we've got the sun rising behind it, so we were doing a morning scene, weren't we? So this tree is backlit, so there's going to be a lot of shadow in there, and where the light's breaking through, we're going to have this warmer light tone. So that's looking good already. You know, sometimes you get to a point where you think you're halfway through doing something, but then you've got to stop and look and go, I don't know if I need to do too much more to that. We will come back to it, but it's very easy to overwork something. So when something's starting to look good, it's a good time to pull yourself up and go, hey, Rod, you know, you've got something good going on there. Don't overwork it, right? And so this speaks to something that I try and talk about every time we do one of these videos for you or live stream, and that is don't overwork your mid-tone, your highlights, because the temptation for a lot of beginners is to paint out their mid-tones and highlights, which is unfortunate. I used to do it myself. Then I realised how valuable it was to maintain them. Now, I just added a bit more yellow ochre into that mix, and I pinched a little bit of that purpley grey there. Okay, so I've just shifted the tone ever so slightly, just because we don't want to have it all the same. Okay, I'm just working into that tree there. Same principle applies here. Okay, and grey it back. All we need to do is just take a little bit of the grey that we've got there, put that into the mix rather than having it too strong. Okay, and then we can work that in. So this needs to be a fairly muted tone there. We don't want that to be too strong. And then where I've got that shadow, I'll just pull a paint out of the brush and then I'll just blur that edge through there. Okay, now the roof, we'll take this alizarin crimson, we'll get some white into that, we'll get some yellow ochre, so we'll go for an orangey tone. So, and that mutes that automatically pretty much. Let's just run that into there. I need to pop that on the other side there. So his colours were fairly muted in the field. Didn't really get green, I don't suppose, until it gets closer to the viewer. So we will just run some of that in here like so. Overlap that building. Okay, now notice as I'm just very lightly dragging across, the paint is breaking up because of the tooth of the canvas pulling the paint off. And that creates a nice effect, which is the reason why I put that underpainting in there. Is we get that nice glowing tone coming through. Okay, a little bit of blue coming out in there. And I'm just going to vary my stroke up a little bit as well. Okay, I want to roll it down the hill too, so let's just get that sort of feel established. We're going to roll it down that hill there. And just be careful as I work around my figures there. Yellow in there now. So now we've got a green that's going to be just a little bit more punchy. We'll just integrate it back up into what we've been doing here so that it doesn't have too big a jump. Okay. We're getting a nice little field happening here, a little hillside, kind of idyllic scenery really. Mother and daughter out there picking their flowers first thing in the morning. Let's tackle these people. I'm going to put the main lady in a white dress. So we'll start off with a shadow tone, so white, blue and red. Okay. Needs to be on the blue side, don't make it on the red side. So a little bit more blue in there. Okay, a little touch more white. And let me just see if I can't just fashion in her dress there. Now you might think, Rod, you just said it was going to be a white dress. Why have you put it into a mauve tone? That's the shadow. Okay, we'll put in a, probably even needs to be a little bit darker than that. We'll put in a highlight white in a moment, but just a little touch of shadow like that. And for our little girl, let's go over pink dress. And they're out there picking flowers first thing in the morning. Nice thing to do. Okay, and that pink on her dress is going to tie in with the poppy field, the nice colours of the poppies. Okay, good. Now we'll come to a small brush to get some details in there. So this is just, again, it's a flat brush. It's just a little bit smaller. Give us our dark. And we're not going to see their faces. I'm going to avoid painting their faces, so a little bit of dark hair like so. And for the girl, a little bit of a red just to indicate her face. And then she'll have the same dark hair. But then I'm going to put on her a little hat. Flowers up there. Okay. And now we're going to start getting into our poppies. So we're going to use the permanent alizarin over here. A little touch of the lighter version of it. Maybe a touch of white. Okay. And I'm just going to just start to very lightly introduce these. Now, no detail because these are the distant ones here, right? And they're running down to the path, down this hill. Okay. Just very lightly with the brush. And this is our little field of poppies here. Okay. And we probably want the same in here. So we're just dancing these along the top really of the grasses that we've already put in there. No detail though at this stage, yeah? So they're standing in a field of these poppies. Okay, see that technique there? I'm just running that up and down, getting slightly brighter tones in there now. Come back to our smaller flat brush and let's just take big blobs of the, actually not too much because you just need to be careful how you approach this, but just go to get the ends of it there. And I wouldn't be using this brighter red up the back. So all around the ladies, because they've obviously come out to pick the poppies. Apparently in France, poppies are considered to be a bit of a weed, whereas we kind of, well, they're a symbol, aren't they, as well, of fallen soldiers in the Great War. Okay, a little something like that. Don't overdo it. Very easy to overdo it. And try and avoid that if you can. I'm going to get a little bit more of this yellow. Kind of like the idea of having some little patches of yellow here and there into it. Just be careful you don't detail up like areas where you don't particularly want the eye to venture. You know, up in corners and so on. We want to think about where's the eye going to be pulled to, and often where it gets pulled to is where you find the most amount of detail. The eye tends to settle there. So just be mindful of that. A little bit more of this blue. Just run some bluey tones in there. Okay, I'll stand back and have a look. I'm just mixing up a dark green here. More work around the house there, just sort of make that sit back in to the landscape a bit. Best way to do that, so that it doesn't look like it's pasted on, is just to add some more bushes around it, and that just layers over the top and helps it to all sit a bit better. Now I am thinking that our path there is probably needs to be a bit lighter, so we'll just add white into the poppy field colour and a bit of yellow ochre. Okay, so I am thinking now that we'll just get a little bit of extra work into these two ladies. So I'm going to take this mauve tone and I'm going to just utilize my what I'm doing is just putting in her hat. I don't know if that mull stick's actually helping, so pop that out of the way. Look, as I said, we're not going to paint portraits here. We're just going to put a little indication. Which is all Monet ever did with his paintings, really. He didn't paint highly figurative work, or some of his paintings he did, but paintings like this one, they were just little indications of people. Soften that into her dress there. I do think maybe that side needs to be just a little darker. And well, friends, I think we've pretty much come to a finish on this one. I'm happy with the way this has come up. It's a nice little painting, and it's got a nice feel to it. It's got a bit of atmosphere, a bit of life. Fairly simplistic approach, you know, as we always try and do here on Learn to Paint TV. We try and keep it simplified so that pretty much anyone can have a go at this one. And you can, you know. We've utilised a famous painting. Let me just bring it up for you again. You know, Monet's Poppies. We've utilised that as a source of inspiration, and obviously he's put a lot more detail work into it. He's probably taken 10 hours, 20 hours to complete what became an iconic painting, and you can do that too if you want. But there's the original Monet and there's our version of it. If I give you a close-up, there we go. There's our interpretation of it. Two sisters, I'm going to call them sisters, playing in a field in amongst the poppies. And not a bad little project, a fun one. But I think the important thing is that you can basically find your favourite artists and don't copy their work, definitely. But use it as inspiration for creating something original. So this is based off, inspired by Monet's The Poppies. But you wouldn't say it's a direct copy at all. It's very much an original painting, utilising that inspiration. And I'd encourage you to do the same thing. So you should never be lost for what am I going to paint next. There's so many images available on the internet that you can then turn into a little subject like this. And of course, in the Learn to Paint Academy, we've got over 100 painting projects now. This will be one of them. And 20 plus courses, we're always adding more. So if you haven't registered for the free course at the Learn to Paint Academy, do that first. Go to Learn to Paint, www.learntopaint.academy, and then you'll see a button on there saying free course. Click on that and register for the free course. And you'll learn more about our working methodology, which is the Moore method of painting. 3 steps, 3 colours, 3 brushes. We've simplified it right down for beginners. And drop by and check us out. I'll put the web address underneath me there. Come by, check us out, register for the free course, and I'll teach you more about our approach to how to paint. And this is just one little example. There's plenty more where that came from. Hope you've enjoyed this week's Learn to Paint TV. My name's Rod Moore. I'll see you in next week's episode of Learn to Paint TV or over at the Learn to Paint Academy. Cheers for now.